When you're standing in front of a horse and the horse feels uncomfortable enough to want to bite you, especially if he has time to ferment on the idea, he'll put his head down, and when he does that, either you or he will have to take at least 1 or 2 steps back for him to be able to comfortably put his head down. And what that does is put his body, his main part of his body, his chest area, farther away from you. And if he puts his head out even further, that puts him even further away. And as I explained, you see that in a horse that's chasing another horse. That if the horse were to chase the other horse with its head up and its body in closer to that horse, it could be kicked very easily. But with it being farther away, with its neck down and its head out slightly, it's putting its main body farther away, and it can recoil back and not be in the kick zone. And the horse is doing the same thing when it's prepping to bite, and it puts its head down and it backs up like that. It's putting its chest out of your strike zone. It's putting itself at an advantage. Head down. There you go. Head down and the nose out. See how much farther away from his body here that I am if he has his head down and he stepped back a little bit, versus if his head is up and I'm in closer. If his head is up and I'm in closer, I can actually reach out and whack him. Well, I hope you can see that in a normal situation, a horse putting its head down, he's not going to put it down the front of your shirt. He's going to take a step back to put his head down. Jap's just taking what I'm asking him very literally and putting his head right down the front of my shirt. Especially if a horse is afraid, he's not going to put his head down that close to you like that. He's going to take that step back, at least 1 step back. See, if I'm standing in front of him like this, and he bites me, he decides to take off. He put himself a little bit off balance to go that way or that way to get away from me. So his only option really would be to back up and turn, which would be awkward as well. But if he backs up a couple steps to bite, that's 1 step. If he now decides to get away from me, he can clear me very easily and go right out around me. In these examples where I'm standing in front of him with his head and neck up, it may look like I'm crowding him and standing in too close to him, but that's because I'm trying to show you where you would be standing if he actually had his head higher than that. A horse that's excited and anxious enough to be thinking about biting isn't going to be carrying his head as low as this horse is. Horses... This horse has a real phobia of the vet, and a person who was introduced to me as a trainer tried to work with him to get him to stand still for the vet. And I'm sure they can't hear around your nose. No. The person was trying to get him to stand absolutely still for the vet. And the way they were doing this was they were jerking on his lead rope or his halter anytime he moved his head even a smidgen. This horse felt trapped, and I could see that he was both giving aggressive signals, and he was being fearful. She came very close to being bit and didn't even realize it. All she saw was his head went down, and she said, "Look, it's working, he's becoming submissive." I don't blame her for not knowing that him putting his head down was that he was intending to bite her. Yeah, I blame the training industry. In every entry training video or demo or seminar or clinic that you go to, all they talk about is head down to calm the horse down, head down to make the horse submissive. And they don't tell you all the other options of why a horse puts its head down. There are many, many reasons for a horse putting its head down. For example, if a horse is feeling sullen, they'll put their head down. If a horse is overwhelmed and shutting down, they'll put their head down. There are countless reasons for a horse putting its head down other than it becoming submissive. There is one, other than the biting issue that we're talking about, that I'd like to discuss for a second, because I really hate to see it happen, and I'd like the information out there. If you're working with a horse, say in the round pen, and the horse is going around and he starts putting his head down so that his nose is touching the ground, and he continues around with his head down low at the ground, he's not picking his head back up, that's not a sign of submission either. That is a horse that's overwhelmed. You're using much too much force with him in that situation. That's a horse that you've probably missed several cues that he's given you that he understands what you want, and they might have been too subtle for a beginner to recognize, but he gave them and you didn't see them. So if you see a horse do that, put his head down and carry it that low to the ground, round and around, stop, because in his eyes at that point you're just being a bully. When a horse puts its head down, before you assume that it's becoming submissive, you need to look at all the other parts of the horse. You need to see where the ears are, the eyes, the mouth, the tail, the body. It's look in general. This horse in that situation had his ears halfway between laid and up. His mouth was set, which was a huge indicator. His mouth was set and the corners of his mouth were actually twitching. His tail was going between wringing it and tucking it, which one is an aggressive warning and one is showing sign of fear. His legs weren't cocked, they were straight and stiff and rigid, and he was actually leaning to one side, which actually gave an indicator of which way he was going to flee after he bit. In a situation where a horse is showing a lot of fear and anxiety, like this horse was during the vet visit, if you take away the option to flee, which is a natural option of a horse, and you force it to stand absolutely still to face the thing that it's afraid of, then it only has two other options, and none of those options is to become submissive. The other options are to fight or give up. Because the three options horses generally use is they flee, if they're trapped, they fight, or they give up. If a horse puts its head down, please don't automatically assume that it's becoming submissive. Look at the whole horse, look at what everything is doing and not just his head, and then decide what you think he may or may not be intending. Bubby, count! 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 Very good boy! Nice job, Bubby.